Hey, this is Tony from the Cold Case Project, where we focus on unsolved cases across the United States. Our mission is to bring attention to these unresolved mysteries that need your help. All the information we cover in these cases is readily available on the internet, but we rewrite and repurpose it for the purpose of these videos. Our goal is to spread the word about the thousands of unsolved cold cases still out there. Thank you for watching. If you want to help shed light on these cases, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Your support can make a difference.
Agnes Young was last seen in Long Branch, Pennsylvania, sometime around 1986. This seemingly simple statement marks the beginning of a complex and unsettling mystery, a disappearance shrouded in conflicting accounts and suspicious circumstances. A missing persons report was officially filed for Agnes on October 1st of that year, but the details surrounding this report, who filed it and why there was a delay, remain unclear, adding an early layer of intrigue to the case. Agnes Young has never been heard from again. Her disappearance left a void in the lives of her family and friends, and the lack of answers has only deepened the mystery over the years. However, while Agnes vanished, her Social Security disability checks continued to be cashed monthly from 1991 to 2001. This detail, seemingly contradictory to the idea that she had simply disappeared, became a focal point of the investigation. Agnes's husband, Edward R. Young, plays a central role in this narrative. A photograph of Edward Young became associated with the case, his image a stark reminder of the man at the center of this unsolved disappearance. What is particularly striking about the initial stages of this case is that Edward Young did not report his wife missing in 1986. This is a highly unusual detail. Spouses are typically the first to report a missing loved one, especially in cases where there is genuine concern for their safety. Edward's failure to do so immediately raised red flags and cast a shadow of suspicion over his actions. The reasons behind his inaction remain a significant question in the investigation. The timeline of events took another strange turn in 2001. Edward R. Young applied for Social Security disability benefits for himself. He claimed that he suffered from a nervous condition, a vague but potentially debilitating ailment that he believed qualified him for assistance. However, because Agnes Young was also receiving Social Security disability benefits, the Social Security Administration had to reconcile the two claims. The SSA requested that both Agnes and Edward Young come to their office on September 21, 2001. This meeting was crucial for the SSA to evaluate Edward's claim and ensure that both parties were receiving benefits appropriately. It was at this meeting that Edward Young presented a story that would further complicate the investigation. Edward Young arrived at the Social Security office alone. He told officials that he had not seen Agnes since earlier that month. His explanation for her absence was that she had gone to New York City to go sightseeing with friends and had never returned. He then added a chilling detail. He speculated that Agnes had died in the terrorist attacks that occurred at the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001. This explanation was immediately met with suspicion by the Social Security officials. While the 9/11 attacks were a horrific tragedy that impacted countless lives, Edward's claim seemed too convenient, too perfectly timed to explain his wife's long-term absence. The officials found it difficult to believe that a woman who had last been seen in 1986 would suddenly travel to New York City to sightsee, only to be caught in such a devastating event. The Social Security Administration, acting on their suspicions, made a critical decision. They terminated Agnes Young's disability benefits. This decision was based on the belief that Edward's story was not credible and that Agnes was likely not alive. However, Edward Young's application for his own disability benefits was eventually approved, creating a paradoxical situation where one spouse was deemed deceased for benefit purposes while the other received assistance. The SSA attempted to contact Agnes Young to verify her status, but their efforts were unsuccessful. They could not locate her, and there was no record of her having contacted any government agencies or medical facilities. This lack of any trace of Agnes further solidified the suspicion that she had met with foul play. Law enforcement became more directly involved as the discrepancies in Edward Young's account became clear. When police questioned him about Agnes's disappearance, he was unable to provide any concrete details about her trip to New York City. He could not identify the friends who allegedly accompanied her, nor could he describe the vehicle they traveled in. These omissions were significant. If Agnes had indeed gone on a trip with friends, it would be reasonable to expect her husband to know their names or some basic information about them. Edward's inability to do so raised serious doubts about the veracity of his story. Further investigation revealed another troubling detail. Officials at the bank where Agnes Young's Social Security benefits checks were cashed stated that they had never seen her. This was another major red flag. If Agnes was alive and receiving benefits, she would presumably have had some interaction with the bank, either in person or through signed documentation. Edward Young, however, denied having cashed any of the checks himself, a claim that investigators found difficult to believe. As the investigation deepened, the picture of Agnes Young's life became clearer, and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance grew even more perplexing. Agnes had 11 older siblings. This large family network, which would typically provide support and connection, had not seen Agnes since around 1985 or 1986, the same time frame as her disappearance. This was highly unusual. It suggested that Agnes had become estranged from her family, but the reasons for this estrangement, and whether it was voluntary or forced, remained a mystery. Edward Young had apparently provided his own explanation for Agnes's absence to her family. He told them that she had been committed to a mental institution in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He further claimed that she had later been transferred to a mental institution in New York City after the Pittsburgh hospital burned down. This story, while elaborate, was ultimately proven to be false. Authorities conducted an extensive search for Agnes Young in mental hospitals in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and New York. They searched for any records that might indicate she had been a patient at any of these facilities. However, their search yielded no results. There are no recent records of Agnes Young in any of the hospitals they investigated. This discovery undermined Edward Young's explanation to his wife's family and further solidified the suspicion that he was attempting to conceal the truth about her disappearance. Faced with mounting evidence of inconsistencies and potential deception, authorities obtained a warrant to search Edward Young's property. They hoped to find evidence that would shed light on Agnes's fate, and the warrant indicated a growing belief that she may have been the victim of foul play. The search focused on the possibility that her body might be found on the property, a grim but necessary step in the investigation. In May 2002, the investigation took a dramatic turn. Investigators obtained a second warrant and returned to Edward Young's home. Their intent was twofold: to conduct a more thorough search of the property and to interview Edward Young again about Agnes's disappearance. However, when they arrived at the residence, they found that Edward Young was dead. He had committed suicide by shooting himself in the head. Edward Young's suicide raised profound questions about his involvement in his wife's disappearance. Did he take his own life out of guilt? Was he unable to cope with the pressure of the investigation? Or were there other factors at play? His death, while providing a kind of closure to the investigation of his actions, left the mystery of Agnes Young's fate even more deeply shrouded in uncertainty. Agnes Young's case remains unsolved. On the morning of May 8, 1938, Marjorie West attended a church service with her family in their hometown of Bradford, Pennsylvania. After the service, her parents, Shirley and Cecil West, decided to celebrate Mother's Day with a picnic. They chose the White Gravel area, a wooded location about a 40-minute drive from Bradford. The West family, including Marjorie, her 11-year-old sister Dorothea, and her 7-year-old brother Alan, drove south along U.S. Route 219. They followed an old railroad grade from Custer City to Marshburg, Pennsylvania, and entered the White Gravel area from Chapel Fork Road in McKean County. The family was joined by extended family, including Cecil's parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, and there were many other people at the park. After arriving at the picnic site, the family had lunch and spent some time playing. Later in the day, Marjorie and Dorothea were picking wildflowers. Dorothea recalled that their parents warned them not to go behind a large boulder near the flowers, explaining that there was a risk of rattlesnakes in the area. Dorothea said that their father and brother checked the area. At approximately 3 p.m., Dorothea left Marjorie alone for a short time to speak with their mother, who was just a few yards away. When Dorothea returned, Marjorie was gone. She has never been seen or heard from again. Initially, the family searched for Marjorie themselves, shouting her name and looking around the immediate area. When their initial search produced no results, Marjorie's mother called the police. The police arrived and began their investigation. They searched the surrounding area, but found no evidence of Marjorie's whereabouts. There are no footprints, no clothing, and no indication of which direction she might have gone. Witnesses reported seeing 2 vehicles drive past the West picnic site before Marjorie's disappearance. Authorities identified the cars and determined that neither was involved in her case. At first, authorities believed that Marjorie had simply wandered off into the woods and become lost. The wooded area surrounding the picnic site was dense, and it was possible for a young child to become disoriented. Hundreds of people, including family, friends, and volunteers from the community, joined the search. The search for Marjorie received extensive local and national media attention. Despite the large-scale search effort, no trace of Marjorie was found. Searchers explored the countryside, knocking on doors, talking to shopkeepers, and even pulling over traffic to ask for information. The lack of any clues led investigators to consider other possibilities. One theory was that Marjorie had fallen into an abandoned oil well, which were common in the area. Searchers found what appeared to be a freshly dug grave deep in the woods, but upon excavation, it turned out to be a buried cask of wine. A scrap of lace was also discovered, and some people speculated that it might be a piece of Marjorie's clothing, but it was later determined that she was not wearing any lace at the time of her disappearance. The day after Marjorie disappeared, on May 9th, authorities brought in scent-tracking dogs to aid in the search. However, the dogs were unable to pick up Marjorie's scent, making it impossible to track her. Over 3,000 civilians and 500 police officers participated in the search, covering a 300-square-mile area. A few days after Marjorie's disappearance, a $2,500 reward was offered for information leading to her whereabouts. In 1938, the average income was just over $1,500, so this was a substantial amount of money, equivalent to tens of thousands of dollars today. On the night of Marjorie's disappearance, at 11:38 p.m., a taxi driver in Thomas, West Virginia, approximately an 8-hour drive from White Gravel, reported a possible sighting. The driver claimed he saw a weeping girl matching Marjorie's description, wearing similar clothes, riding in a dark green sedan with an unidentified man in his 30s. The taxi driver said the man told him the girl was his daughter and asked for directions to the nearest motel. The driver directed him to an establishment across the street. The man left the child in the car and went inside the hotel, but there were no vacancies. The man returned to the car and inquired about a local liquor store. The driver directed him to a bar down the road. Several days later, the taxi driver identified Marjorie as the girl in the car. A gas station attendant outside of Thomas also reported seeing a man matching the description, who was refueling a dark green sedan. The attendant noticed a bundle wrapped in a gray blanket in the back seat of the car. The man's identity remains a mystery. Investigators determined that the travel time between the White Gravel area and Thomas, West Virginia, was approximately 8 hours. If Marjorie had been taken from the picnic site around 3 p.m., they would have arrived in Thomas between 11 o'clock and 11:30 p.m. that evening. However, authorities were unable to confirm the child's identity. Over the years, many theories have emerged about what happened to Marjorie. Some speculated that she was taken to Canada by other family members. Others theorized that she may have fallen down an abandoned oil well near White Gravel. Another theory suggested that Marjorie was abducted and taken to the southern or southwestern United States. One theory pointed towards the Tennessee Children's Home Society, an adoption agency operated by Georgia Tan near Memphis, Tennessee. Tan was initially praised for placing at-risk children in adoptive homes. However, authorities later discovered that Tan had kidnapped over 1,200 children between 1932 and 1951. The majority of the children were abducted from states bordering Tennessee, although some were from as far away as Connecticut. Tan placed most of the children with wealthy couples in New York City and Los Angeles. None of these theories have been proven, and no one has ever been implicated in Marjorie's disappearance. Marjorie's sister, Dorothea, strongly resembled her, and photos of Dorothea have been used to create age-progressed images of what Marjorie might look like today. The case of Marjorie West remains one of the most baffling unsolved missing child cases in American history. Laura Thompson was last seen in New Castle, Pennsylvania, on January 7, 1993. At the time, she was a high school student and the mother of a 9-month-old son. Despite the responsibilities of motherhood, Laura's disappearance was initially classified as a runaway by authorities. This classification persisted for many years, even though she had no prior history of running away and left behind all of her belongings. The truth behind Laura's disappearance remained hidden for over 17 years. It wasn't until September 2010 that the case took a dramatic turn with the arrest of 2 suspects, Joseph N. Marshall Jr. and his friend, Sean M. McDonough. Laura Thompson knew both men. She was last seen heading to meet them to play cards. The key to unraveling the mystery lay with Shannon Marshall, Joseph Marshall Jr.'s wife. In the summer of 2010, Shannon Marshall went to the police and revealed what she knew about Laura Thompson's fate. She had been aware of the crime since January 1993. During their engagement, Joseph Marshall Jr. had confessed to her that he had killed someone, although he initially withheld the victim's identity. Over time, Joseph Marshall Jr. divulged more details to Shannon. He told her that McDonough had persuaded Laura Thompson to come to a cabin in the woods of Shenango Township, Pennsylvania. Once there, McDonough had killed Laura by stabbing her to death and then assaulted her body. The horror did not end there. Several months later, McDonough returned to the shallow grave where Laura was buried. He exhumed her body and removed her skull, teeth, and hands, relocating them to another, unknown location. In the summer of 1993, Shannon Marshall accompanied Joseph Marshall Jr. and McDonough when they dug up the rest of Laura's remains and disposed of them in a ravine. Despite having knowledge of these heinous acts for many years, Shannon Marshall did not come forward to the authorities until July 2010. Her decision to speak out was prompted by her decision to divorce Joseph Marshall Jr. She feared for her own safety and believed that coming forward was the only way to protect herself. To aid the investigation, Shannon agreed to wear a wire and record conversations with her husband and McDonough. These recordings provided crucial evidence that implicated both men in Laura Thompson's murder. Shannon Marshall was not charged in connection with the homicide. Following Shannon Marshall's revelations, Joseph Marshall Jr. was charged with a range of serious offenses, including criminal homicide, murder, conspiracy, and abuse of a corpse. Sean M. McDonough faced the same charges, along with 2 counts of rape, reflecting the sexual assault of Laura Thompson's remains. At the time of his arrest, McDonough was living in Thibodaux, Louisiana, and had no prior criminal record. The legal proceedings that followed revealed the complexities of the case. In February 2015, Sean M. McDonough pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of third-degree murder. He was sentenced to 8 to 16 years in prison, with credit for time served, which amounted to more than 4 years spent in jail while awaiting the resolution of the case. Later that same month, Joseph Marshall Jr. also entered a guilty plea, but to the lesser charge of misdemeanor abuse of a corpse. He received a sentence of 1 to 2 years in prison. However, because he had already served 2 years in custody, he was released. All other charges against him, including murder, were dropped. The prosecution determined that there was insufficient evidence to secure a murder conviction against him. The investigation into Laura Thompson's murder was further complicated by the disposal of her remains. Authorities believe that her body may be irretrievable. After her body was dumped in the ravine, a farmer demolished a barn and deposited a large amount of earth into the same location, making any potential recovery extremely difficult. Despite the convictions, many questions remain about Laura Thompson's murder. The brutality of the crime and the long delay in bringing the perpetrators to justice highlight the enduring pain and frustration of unsolved or poorly handled cases. Although 2 individuals were convicted, the case continues to be classified as a runaway by some agencies. It's a story that begins with an ordinary night and quickly descends into a mystery that has haunted a community for years. It's the story of Felicia Thomas, a young woman who vanished, leaving behind unanswered questions and a void in the lives of those who loved her. February 11th, 2004. Felicia Thomas, 22, finished her shift at the Pump-In Pantry, a convenience store on Route 29 in Lake Township, Pennsylvania. Her co-workers remembered her being in good spirits as she left for the night. She was heading home to the place she shared with her boyfriend, Ed Radasky, on Route 118. Ed said that he had fallen asleep on the couch, but that Felicia woke him up when she arrived, giving him a hug and a kiss. They talked briefly, discussing their plans for Valentine's Day. Felicia asked him for a beer. He told her it was outside on his ATV, and then he went back to sleep. You can almost picture that scene, can't you? A quiet moment at the end of the day, a young couple making plans. It's a snapshot of a life that would soon be disrupted. Ed said that he woke up again about an hour later, sometime between 1 o'clock and 1:30 a.m. on a morning of February 12th. Felicia wasn't there. He searched the house, then went outside. Her cigarettes were gone, but her purse and winter coat were still there, even though it was a cold February night. Ed, puzzled and perhaps a little worried, went outside and noticed the beer on his ATV hadn't been touched. He decided to drive his ATV to a friend's house about a mile away, thinking Felicia might have gone there. When he didn't find her, he returned home to wait. But here's where the timeline becomes unsettling. Felicia wasn't reported missing to the Pennsylvania State Police until 5:30 p.m. on February 13th, over 40 hours after she was last seen. It was Felicia's mother, Pauline Bailey, who filed the report. Pauline and Ed had different accounts of what happened in those first few days. Ed said he wasn't initially concerned because there were no signs of forced entry, and he hadn't heard anything suspicious. At one point, he even underwent hypnosis to try and recall more details. He remembered hearing the front door and then a car door closing as he was falling asleep. He said he thought Felicia might have gone to visit her mother. Pauline, however, said she first learned her daughter was missing when the Pump-In Pantry called her on February 13th because Felicia hadn't picked up her paycheck. When she called Ed's mother, she was told Felicia had just stepped out to get it, which wasn't true. Adding to the confusion, a neighbor of Ed's mother told Pauline that they'd seen 4 people leaving the house on ATVs in the early morning hours of February 12th, but only 3 returned. These 3 people then spent the next few hours leaving and coming back on the ATVs multiple times. A black truck was also seen parked outside the house and then driven away around 4:30 a.m. The police, however, didn't give much weight to this neighbor's account, as the neighbor reportedly had a personal issue with Ed. Despite these discrepancies, the police stated that Ed cooperated fully with the investigation and was never considered suspect. He reportedly passed a polygraph test, though this has never been officially confirmed. The man who gave Felicia a ride home from work was also cleared in the days following Felicia's disappearance. Investigators found some mysterious notes, suggesting her body could be found behind the Mountain Fresh supermarket on Route 118, not far from Ed's house. The supermarket became a focal point of the search, but extensive searches of the area and the surrounding woods yielded nothing. That on February 20th, the Pennsylvania State Police searched the residence of Stephen Allen Martin, a friend of Ed Radasky's. An ATV, several guns, ammunition, an ashtray with cigarette butts, and garbage bags filled with empty beer cans were taken from the house, but police didn't publicly comment on what, if anything, of evidentiary value was found. It turned out that Martin had called Ed and Felicia's house on the night Felicia disappeared, between 11:30 p.m. and midnight. Felicia answered and told him Ed was sleeping. This made Martin the last known person to speak to Felicia. He became a person of interest in the case. Martin denied any involvement. He said he went to bed shortly after speaking to Felicia. He also claimed that at around 4 a.m., his girlfriend, Leanne Barzalowski, called him upset about receiving prank calls, and he went to her house to comfort her. The investigation into Felicia's disappearance was complicated by Martin's connection to another missing person case, that of Leanne's younger sister, Jennifer Barzalowski, who had disappeared in 2001. Martin's life began to unravel. He was arrested on weapons charges, then accused of supplying drugs and alcohol to teenage girls. He was arrested multiple times in 2004, facing charges including endangering the welfare of children, corruption of minors, and indecent assault. In December 2004, Martin was involved in a fatal car accident while fleeing from the police. He was arrested and charged, and eventually pleaded guilty to vehicular homicide and other charges. He was sentenced to prison. In August 2005, Martin was found hanging in his cell. He died the following day. His death was ruled as suicide. He maintained his innocence in Felicia and Jennifer's cases until the end. Martin's suicide brought a sense of grim finality, but it didn't solve the mystery of Felicia's disappearance. As the years passed, rumors and theories swirled. One of the most prevalent was that Felicia had been at a party the night she disappeared at a mobile home on Timber Lane. The rumor was that Felicia was sexually assaulted and murdered at this party, and that her body was dismembered and disposed of. The lead investigator confirmed Felicia was at the party, but said she was last seen leaving with Martin and another man. This other man was dropped off, leaving Felicia alone with Martin. The rumors persisted, even years later. Cadaver dogs were brought to the property and reportedly indicated the presence of human remains in a barn in a nearby wooded area. But when police searched, they found nothing. The mobile home where the party allegedly took place was demolished. The property changed hands in the years since Felicia disappeared. Her family and friends have continued to search for answers. They believe that someone in the community knows what happened to her. Felicia's case remains open. The truth about what happened to her is still out there, waiting to be discovered. The Pennsylvania summer of 2012 clung to the skin like a second, unwelcome layer. In Palmyra, a town where the ordinary hum of life usually prevailed, a disquieting dissonance was building, note by jarring note, around the final hours of a young woman named Courtney Stouffer. July 28th bled into the 29th, a night thick with youthful indiscretions, simmering resentments, and a vanishing act that defied logic, leaving behind only a chilling vacuum. Courtney, just 21, was a vibrant thread in the fabric of her large family, one of 6 siblings. Raised on a Grantville farm, even after her parents' divorce, she remained a cherished daughter, a beloved sister. She moved through the world with a self-styled bohemian flair, a free spirit who embraced a hippie aesthetic, a stark contrast to the unsettling drama that would define her final hours. To make ends meet, Courtney juggled part-time jobs, a dog groomer, a hairstylist at El Salon in Palmyra, and an employee at her father's recycling equipment business. She was carving out her own path, a young woman navigating the complexities of life and love. Her current residence was a top-floor apartment in a duplex on West Main Street in Palmyra, a space she shared with her 20-year-old boyfriend, Bradder. Their relationship, however, was navigating a rocky terrain. At the time, Brad was under house arrest, serving probation for a youthful indiscretion, driving under the influence. The evening of July 28th saw a small gathering at their apartment, a party fueled by youthful exuberance and, unwisely, alcohol. For Brad, this was a direct violation of his probation, a ticking time bomb in the otherwise carefree atmosphere. Someone, their identity initially shrouded in mystery, made a call to the Lebanon County Probation Services office. The authorities arrived, the music died, and the flashing lights painted the scene in stark, accusatory hues. Brad was arrested, the consequences of the ill-advised party suddenly stark and real. After the others had dispersed, Courtney, her voice laced with concern, called her mother, Wendy. She feared Brad faced a lengthy prison sentence, a significant disruption to their young lives. Wendy offered to come over, a mother's instinct to comfort, but Courtney, perhaps seeking a different kind of solace, declined. Shortly after 10 p.m., a text message flashed on Courtney's phone. It was from Cody Pute, a 29-year-old friend, and another acquaintance, Milton Rodriguez. They suggested meeting at a bar called the Gas Station in nearby Hummelstown. Needing to blow off steam, Courtney drove her 2002 Ford Focus to the rendezvous. At the gas station, the trio met up with another couple. The night, still young and full of possibility, took a westward turn. They piled into Milton's car, leaving Courtney's Focus behind, and drove 10 miles to Harrisburg, seeking a different kind of energy, a different distraction. Their destination, a bar named the Hardware Bar. But the undercurrent of the evening remained turbulent. Courtney, still simmering with resentment over Brad's arrest, began to drink, the alcohol amplifying her already frayed emotions. Around 1:50 a.m., the simmering pot boiled over. Courtney found herself in a heated argument with Arver Brown, a male acquaintance who was at the bar with his girlfriend. Arver was also a friend of Cody and Milton, a tangled web of connections. But in Courtney's mind, Arver was not just another face in the crowd. She harbored a deep suspicion that he had previously broken into her apartment, a violation of her sanctuary, a theft of her peace of mind and her money. The confrontation escalated, voices rising above the din of the bar, accusations flying like shards of glass. The bouncers intervened, their patience exhausted, and Courtney was ejected from the establishment, thrust back into the cool night air, her anger still a burning ember. Eventually, she reconnected with Cody, Milton, and the other couple. Cody, now the designated driver, steered Milton's car, ferrying them back towards Palmyra. After dropping off Milton and the couple at their respective homes, Courtney, perhaps fueled by a stubborn independence or the lingering effects of the alcohol, convinced Cody that she was capable of driving her own car home. He reluctantly agreed to follow her back to the gas station, ensuring her safe return to her vehicle. They arrived in Palmyra shortly after 3 a.m. As they approached Courtney's duplex, fate, or perhaps something more sinister, intervened. They crossed paths with Courtney's 3 downstairs neighbors. One of them was Todd Sock, a 44-year-old single man who lived in the adjacent second-floor apartment. Todd and Courtney shared a volatile relationship, a constant friction of noise complaints and simmering animosity. Courtney believed with a growing certainty that Todd was the one who had made the call to probation services, setting in motion the events that led to Brad's arrest. The confrontation that ensued was immediate and explosive. Courtney, her anger finding a physical outlet, kicked Todd in the leg. The other neighbors, Janice Reemschneider and Rich Sheets, a middle-aged couple residing in the first-floor apartment, attempted to defuse the situation. But Courtney and Cody, their defenses up, reportedly met their intervention with hostility, telling them to back off. The couple retreated into their apartment, and Rich, his patience worn thin, dialed the Palmyra Borough Police Department. The police arrived at 3:15 a.m., followed shortly by a backup unit from the North Londonderry Township Police. Law enforcement managed to quell the immediate conflict, issuing a stern warning. One more call to this address, and someone would be going to jail. By 3:50 a.m., a fragile peace seemed to have settled. Everyone retreated to their respective apartments, and Cody, his initial plan to leave thwarted by the ongoing drama, agreed to stay the night with Courtney. But the night was far from over. At 4:11 a.m., barely 20 minutes after the police had departed, the dispatch received another call. It was Todd, his voice tight with anger and frustration. He complained of loud, stomping noises, slamming doors, and threats echoing through the thin walls of his apartment, all emanating from Courtney's unit. 20 minutes later, the Palmyra Borough PD returned to the duplex for the third time that night. One of the officers knocked on Courtney's door. Silence. No response. He could hear the frantic barking of 2 dogs from inside. Peering through a patio door and a nearby window, he noted the darkness within, the absence of any visible disturbance. Accounts differ regarding Todd's actions at this time. Some sources suggest he met the police outside, his anger still palpable. Others claim the police knocked on his door as well, receiving no answer. Whatever the case, with the immediate noise seemingly subsided, the police, their patience likely frayed, left the scene at 4:36 a.m., unaware that the silence they sought was about to become permanent. Sometime within the next few hours, in the liminal space between the receding police sirens and the rising sun, Courtney Stouffer vanished. Not a trace, not a sound, just an echoing emptiness where a vibrant young woman had been. Later that day, Courtney was scheduled to meet her older brother, Ryan, at the Lebanon County Fair. She never appeared. His calls went unanswered. Her mother, Wendy, tried repeatedly throughout the day, her concern growing with each unanswered ring. By the morning of July 30th, the silence had become deafening. Wendy drove to Courtney's duplex, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. Courtney's Ford Focus sat parked outside, the windows inexplicably rolled down, as if she had stepped away for just a moment. But the apartment door was ajar, an unsettling invitation into the unknown. The porch lights, the television, the air conditioner, all still on, frozen in a moment that was no longer. Courtney was gone, but she hadn't packed. All her personal belongings remained. Her purse, her keys, her shoes, her cell phone, its screen a stark testament to the unanswered calls, 18 missed connections from the day before. Even Sheba, her beloved dog since childhood, was there, left unattended, a small, furry sentinel in the growing mystery. An uncharacteristic mess on the floor spoke of a hurried departure, or something more ominous. When he contacted her ex-husband, Scott, the other half of Courtney's foundation, he hadn't heard from her either. Together, they began a frantic outreach, a widening circle of family, friends, and acquaintances, each unanswered call deepening their fear. Scott managed to access Courtney's cell phone, a digital ghost of her last day. Scrolling through her recent texts, he found the exchange with Cody Pute. He reached out, his voice tight with urgency. Cody recounted the events of the previous night, the bar, the argument, the return to Palmyra, the confrontation with Todd. He claimed that after the final police departure, he had gone inside Courtney's apartment, trying to calm her down. But her anger persisted, a storm of yelling and stomping that only subsided when the police returned. They had then switched off the lights, feigning silence until the officer left. Finally, Courtney had calmed down, and they had both fallen asleep. Cody claimed he woke up around 7:56 a.m. Courtney was gone. He assumed she was sleeping in another room, a casual dismissal that would later raise eyebrows. He called out that he was leaving, a perfunctory announcement into the silence, and then exited the apartment. He drove Milton's car to a nearby convenience store, a stop later confirmed by security footage where he bought coffee. He texted Courtney, but received no reply. After returning Milton's car, he went home to Hummelstown, texting Courtney 2 more times throughout the day, each message swallowed by the digital void. Scott, his heart heavy with Cody's account and the unsettling scene at Courtney's apartment, contacted the Palmyra Borough Police Department. But Courtney was an adult. 48 hours had to pass before they would officially begin investigating her disappearance. 2 agonizing days of waiting, of clinging to a sliver of hope that dwindled with each passing hour. The Stauffers spent that night in Courtney's silent apartment, a vigil in the face of the unknown. When morning broke, and Courtney still hadn't returned, the missing persons investigation finally began. When questioned by police, Cody reiterated his story, a narrative that held together on the surface but felt strangely hollow. He claimed to be a heavy sleeper, oblivious to any unusual sounds or activity during the crucial hours when Courtney vanished. He had no idea what had happened to her. Courtney's family and friends mobilized, organizing search parties, plastering the community with missing person flyers, their faces etched with worry and determination. A candlelight vigil was held at the Palmyra police station, a silent plea for her safe return. The Lebanon County District Attorney's Office Detective Bureau joined the investigation. Courtney's apartment was sealed off, transformed into a crime scene, meticulously processed by numerous law enforcement agencies. But the sterile environment yielded no easy answers. No bloodstains, no signs of a struggle, no forensic evidence to definitively point to foul play within those walls. Warrants were obtained to search Courtney's Ford Focus, Milton Rodriguez's car, and Cody's vehicle. Each search came up empty. The vehicles silent witnesses to a mystery they couldn't explain. The other residents of the duplex, Todd Sock, Janice Reemschneider, and Rich Sheets, all granted police access to their apartments and were deemed cooperative. Janice and Rich confirmed hearing loud, stomping noises from Courtney's apartment shortly before 4 a.m., but claimed they went to bed immediately afterward, their sleep undisturbed by whatever followed. Todd Sock, in a bizarre twist, showed up at the Palmyra police station at 7:30 a.m. that morning, not to inquire about Courtney, but to file a formal complaint against her for kicking him during their earlier altercation. Courtney's parents harbored deep suspicions about Todd. They described his evasiveness, his strange demeanor whenever they tried to ask him about Courtney. Wendy recalled Courtney telling her that Todd was creepy and expressing concern about him videotaping her on the porch just a week before she disappeared, an accusation Todd vehemently denied. It emerged that on the very night Courtney vanished, Todd had left an angry voicemail for their landlady, ranting about wanting Courtney out of the building and threatening to take care of the problem himself if she didn't. Adding to the unsettling picture, Scott and Wendy, staying at Courtney's apartment on the evening of July 30th, claimed they saw Todd nervously pacing in and out of his apartment at least 6 times, carrying multiple bags of garbage to his car. Todd explained these bags contained debris from a home improvement project, and he consented to searches of his apartment, vehicle, and trash. Cadaver dogs were used, but they found nothing to indicate Todd's involvement. For a time, investigators kept the identity of the person who called probation services a secret, but it was eventually confirmed. It was Todd Sock, his call triggered by seeing people bringing cases of beer into Courtney's apartment. A calculated move, perhaps, knowing it could lead to Brad's arrest. While Bradher had a solid alibi, he was in jail. Investigators noted his lack of full cooperation. Rumors circulated that Courtney might have been harmed due to something Brad was involved in. Attention also turned to Arver Brown, the man Courtney argued with at the hardware bar. Courtney smoked marijuana, and Arver was rumored to be a drug dealer. Had their conflict at the bar escalated beyond words? Arver denied breaking into Courtney's apartment and any involvement in her disappearance, claiming he went to his parents' house after leaving the bar and stayed there all night, an alibi that was reportedly substantiated. Scott Stouffer, unable to rest, personally investigated every lead, every rumor, no matter how far-fetched. How can I go to bed at night if I know that I heard something that day and I didn't follow up on it, as ridiculous as it possibly could be? He asked. In March 2014, a new, unsettling lead emerged. Amanda Ballister, a woman from South Lebanon Township, contacted Scott, claiming she had overheard a conversation about Courtney being killed by 2 acquaintances, one of whom had called probation services. Ballister's account painted a dark picture, a plan to get Brad out of the apartment to search for money and drugs that went horribly wrong when they encountered Courtney. She claimed they wrapped her body in a carpet and dumped it in the vast 85-acre Memorial Lake in Memorial Lake State Park, 12 miles away. Scott pleaded with authorities to search the lake, but Lebanon County District Attorney David Arnold remained skeptical, alleging that Ballister had called his office multiple times with information supposedly gleaned from a psychic and had changed her story repeatedly. He stated that all of Ballister's claims had been investigated, and without any hard evidence, a costly and resource-intensive search of the lake was not justified, especially since Lebanon County lacked a scuba diving team. Undeterred, Scott launched an online petition, urging authorities to act. When the new Cumberland River Rescue Team offered their services, Arnold finally relented. A 6-hour search of Memorial Lake yielded nothing. The case gained national attention when it was featured on an episode of Disappeared in April 2017, titled Spirited Away. New tips and leads emerged, but none brought the case any closer to a resolution. Though Courtney's body has never been found, her family planted a tree in Levitt's Park outside of Grantville, a pseudo-grave, a place of remembrance. Courtney loved tubing, and every year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, a Come Home Courtney event is held at Swadara Creek Park in Hershey. Her loved ones gather, inner tubes in hand, and float down the creek towards Hummelstown, a poignant tribute to a life cut short. A $100,000 reward remains on offer for information leading to Courtney's whereabouts. But nearly 12 years have passed. As of May 2025, her case remains cold. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, hit the like button and press the playlist button for more videos.